I uncovered the haunted secrets of a cursed movie theater where unsolved murders whispered. I never should have opened that door. It was a bad idea, a huge mistake. The moment I did, a chill clawed its way up my spine. The air in that theater felt alive, thick with shadows and despair. Every time I visited, I felt the weight of something heavy, like a blanket made of ash draped over my shoulders. The flickering lights, the rusty scent of old popcorn, it all sent shivers through me. I often wondered what could have happened in that place, what dark stories the walls could tell if only they could speak. The theater was abandoned, or so everyone thought. Kids had spread rumors of a curse, of strange figures seen in the corners of your eye, and the whispers that floated like fog through the aisles. Curiosity gnawed at me, pulling me closer as the nights grew colder. One evening, I pushed through the crumbling doors, each creak sounding like a warning. The darkness wrapped around me, an icy grip of dread. I took a deep breath, the air tasted stale, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. And yet I heard something. A soft whisper. My heart raced. I shined my flashlight around, illuminating fading posters, their colors drenched in time. The shadows danced. I wasn't alone. Something moved just beyond the beam of light. A shuffle, then silence. My breath hitched. Then a loud bang echoed from the back row. Panic surged through me. The seats stood like a sea of memories, dusty and unmoving, but I could swear they shifted slightly as I moved. Was I losing my mind? Fear wrapped around me like barbed wire, squeezing tighter. The whispers grew louder, urgent. My pulse thudded in my ears. I had to get out, but my legs felt rooted, stuck in place by an unseen force. I gripped my flashlight tighter, the beam flickering, a bad omen, no doubt. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut with such ferocity it rattled my bones. I was trapped. Shadows stretched out from the corners, twisting, writhing. My heart raced faster. The theater felt like it was breathing. Then, right in front of me, a figure emerged from the dark, half hidden. My scream caught in my throat. The last thing I remember was an impossible chill wrapping around my heart, paralyzing me with fear. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure lingered just outside the reach of my flickering flashlight, a silhouette both imposing and unsettling. Fear cascaded through me like icy water, and the whispers crescendoed, swirling into a maddening cacophony. Every syllable echoed with despair and lost hope, as if the walls themselves were crying out for freedom from their dark fate. I forced my eyes to focus, hoping that clarity would cut through the haze of my terror. The figure, what I could discern of it, was draped in ragged, tattered clothes, its face obscured by shadows. A sense of familiarity flickered at the edges of my mind, brushing against memories long buried. "Help me," it seemed to mouth, though no sound emerged. The air thickened, a stench of decay swirling around me, clawing at my lungs. The theater felt as if it were collapsing inward, the past pressing down on me, demanding recognition. Before I could process its meaning, the figure stepped closer. Its eyes, vacant yet filled with sorrow, reflected the dim light. A shudder ran through me as I caught a glimpse of a name scrawled in blood-like stains across its chest: Anna. A name so small yet heavy, plucking at the strings of my curiosity. "Are you Anna?" I dared to whisper. The name rolled off my tongue like a curse. The figure nodded slowly, the sound of its movements whispering secrets against the backdrop of the theater's oppressive silence. The whispers escalated, drowning out my thoughts. "Help us," they chanted, a haunting echo that seemed to originate from the very fabric of the walls. I staggered backwards, the urge to flee clashing with an insatiable need to understand. "Help, help," Anna's apparition repeated, reaching towards me, her fingers darkened and perpetually outstretched. I felt a pull, raw and primal, as if those skeletal fingers threaded through time, drawing me into her despair. Suddenly, the screen behind her flickered to life, glowing with a feeble light that illuminated her gaunt face. Images danced across the surface, once vibrant scenes of joy now distorted and splattered with shadows. I could see figures flailing, blood splattering against a backdrop that looked eerily familiar. Gasps and screams echoed from the screen, barbed whispers clawing through the air like nails on a chalkboard. "Stop it!" I yelled, clamping my hands over my ears, but the sound seeped into me, embedding itself like a parasite. The space around me throbbed with the intensity of lost souls crying for retribution. I felt the moisture from the air condensing around me, and a cold sweat trickled down my back. The projector whirred and sputtered, displaying scenes of dark rooms and cruel laughter, broken fragments of a time where sinister intentions thrived. Then I saw a figure looming in the distance, its face hidden beneath a grotesque mask, stalking victims mercilessly through shadow and despair. This was not just a movie, it was a record of slaughter, a reality captured on film. "Help," Anna mouthed again, the pain in her eyes immeasurable. The walls trembled, shuddering with an echo of humiliation and horror, as if every soul trapped within yearned for liberation. Then, in an instant, the projection sputtered and collapsed into darkness, the only illumination left coming from Anna's lifeless form. The whispers turned desperate, frantic. "She won't let us go." The temperature plummeted, and I felt an invisible hand grasp my throat, tightening with a vice-like grip. I gasped, struggling against the unseen force. "Anna." I cried out, but my voice was swallowed by the chorus of despair. The shadows surged forward like a tidal wave, enveloping me. I stumbled, caught in a vortex of rage and sorrow, my desperation to flee at odds with the growing realization that the only way to leave was to dig deeper into the darkness. Just when I thought I would suffocate under the weight of it all, the door that had trapped me swung open with a bone-rattling bang, revealing a spectral light that beckoned me forth. I didn't want to see what lay within, yet something darker, something more vile lurked in the corners of that blackened theater. As I wavered on the precipice of escape, Anna reached for me once more, her face contorting in agony. "You must find the truth." Before I could grasp her meaning, the temperature plummeted even further. I couldn't move. Then, an unearthly howl erupted from the shadows, cutting through the silence, a sound that seemed to rattle the very bones of the building around me. And suddenly, from the depths of the darkness, something colossal rose, tearing its way through the fabric of reality. My breath caught in my throat as terror washed over me like a torrent, the weight of the unexplainable crashing down, enveloping me in a shroud of dread. I turned to the door, but it shuddered and slammed shut with brutal force, locking me in, and in the silence that followed, all that was left was the piercing gaze of Anna and the looming thing behind her. It was hungry. The shadows morphed around me, contorting into grotesque shapes that wriggled in the corners of my vision, whispering my name, creeping closer with each agonizing second. Anna's pale face reflected not just sorrow, but an urgent plea, a warning that pricked at the fragile thread of my sanity. I could feel the presence behind her lurking, it pulsed like a heartbeat, a rhythm of malevolence that drove a wedge deeper into my chest. What truth? I dared to ask, my voice trembling as I fought against the cold grip tightening around my chest, pushing me closer to the abyss that beckoned from the door now locked against my escape. The wretched whispers surged again, swallowing my question whole. "The truth lies within," they echoed, elongating the words into a wailing lament, resonating through the very bones of the theater. Anna's fingers twitched as if guiding me toward a darkened corner of the room, a place where the pale light struggled to cast its feeble rays. Before I could register my next movement, Anna's figure drifted closer, her expression shifting from despair to desperation, her mouth opening wide as if to scream. But no sound escaped. The temperature dropped further, and I felt the weight of unseen eyes fastening themselves upon me, growing heavier and more oppressive. Suddenly, the grotesque shadow behind Anna unfurled like a dark flower blooming in reverse, its form rippling as if merging flesh and nightmare. Two bloodied hands emerged from the dark, claw-like and primed for carnage. Each finger dripped with malevolence, slick and glistening, while a grotesque face began to take shape mismatched collage of horror. The moment my eyes locked onto it, a jolt of fear surged through me, electrifying every nerve. This was no mere projection, it was an abyss made flesh, a manifestation of the theater's tortured history. The eyes bore into my soul, hollow yet vibrant with the depths of suffering, despair, and hunger. Run. Anna mouthed, her face twisted in a portrait of anguish. She was fading, the glow around her dimming as the shadow loomed closer. The embrace of the theater tightened, the walls felt alive, whispering my deepest fears with every heartbeat. I turned on my heels, racing toward the projection booth, praying that the legacy of those tortured souls would guide me to salvation. The ground beneath me pulsated, almost sending me crashing to my knees, as if the very theater moaned with hatred for my intrusion. That I reached the booth, a narrow spiral staircase spiraling upward like a twisting funnel of despair. The door was eerily ajar, emitting an ominous light. With the sounds of wretched howls simmering behind me, I launched myself up the staircase, each footfall resounding with urgency and dread, but the darkness pursued relentlessly. As I reached the top, the booth was cloaked in shadows broken only by the glow of the old projector still whirring lazily, casting erratic images that flickered across the walls. I fumbled for the switch, my fingers trembling as I fought to stay grounded amid the chaos that threatened to swallow me whole. What lay before me was a jumble of film reels and outdated equipment, but something shimmered amidst the clutter, an old leather-bound book, its cover worn and frayed. I seized it, instantly sensing a shiver slither down my spine, the weight of dread beckoning me to delve deeper into its secrets. When I opened it, the pages were filled with names, stricken with blood-red ink and panic-stricken scrawls, victims, all marked as lost. My heart raced as I pieced the connections together, matched names with faces from the movie playing in the theater below. Then the projector flickered violently, and the image morphed into the grotesque figure from my visions. It leered at me, its maw widening in sinister anticipation. I could hear Anna's voice mingling with the tortured cries of the damned echoing within the room. Help us, then. The entire screening room filled with a cold, blaring alarm of laughter, inhuman and jubilant, as if the theater itself relished the despair and madness it harbored. The shadow behind me surged, wrapping around my legs like chains, constricting my freedom. I clasped the book tightly, instinctively realizing it contained the key to unraveling this darkness. In it lay the secret of the theater, the source of Anna's anguish, something I may have unwittingly signed up for when I dared to step inside. But before I could comprehend my next move, chilling laughter echoed, clearer now, and the door below burst open with a force that rattled the booth. Out of the inky darkness, countless figures poured into the theater, their faces contorted in eternal anguish, their hands outstretched as if beckoning me back. That I won't let you go. The face from the shadows roared, now looming above me, a grotesque semblance of power and rage. The echo of that voice reverberated through the very walls, drowning out my thoughts, and then darkness took me, drowning all light, as the theater turned its hungry gaze upon me. In that moment, I realized, the terror had only just begun. An icy grip seized my throat as darkness crashed down upon me like a tidal wave, swallowing the flickering light of the projector. The laughter continued, echoing through the confines of the booth, its dissonance wrapping tightly around me, squeezing the breath from my lungs. I struggled against the thousands of shadows that seemed to swell from every corner, each one a wretched remnant of souls trapped in torment, their ghastly visages mirroring my own fear. That I clutched the leather-bound book desperately to my chest. The swirling shadows pulsed with an otherworldly energy, mesmerizing yet horrifying, drawing me closer as if they craved something more, a sacrifice, perhaps. The grotesque face loomed ever closer, its features distinct now, hollow cheeks, gaping maw, and eyes, countless eyes, each one a window into a world of abhorrent suffering. However, there was a flicker of recognition. I could swear I had seen it before, perhaps on one of those old film reels. Just as I began to grasp the horrid nature of this seeker of souls, something cold and sharp brushed against the back of my neck like fingers trailing down my spine, chilling the very marrow of my bones. Panic surged, forcing me into a primal reflex. I dropped the book, the leather cover slapping against the wooden floor as I whirled around. What I saw brought an even greater wave of cold dread. A figure emerged from the shadows, a woman with a face that shimmered like a long-lost memory. Yet the harsh light caught the edges of her eyes, and I saw then they were not windows to a soul but black voids, devoid of all warmth. "Help me," she rasped, her voice distorted, a grotesque parody of Anna's pleading. Perhaps, I thought, she too was trapped, lost amidst the film's ghosts, but how could I trust any of them? The laughter intensified, an unholy symphony surrounding us, growing louder until it melded into an unending roar. I could sense the pressure building, a collective yearning from the shadows clamoring to reclaim me, to absolve themselves of the burden they carried. More figures melted into view, victims, hunched and gaunt, their mouths hanging agape in silent screams, their rotting hands grasping at empty air. "Take her," the distorted whispers twisted around me, sounding not unlike my own voice. "You must take her." Each syllable was laden with desperation. Their faces twisted with a longing I couldn't comprehend. As if drawn by invisible strings, the woman with the sunken eyes moved closer, her arms raised as if reaching for something beyond me. "You can save us," she murmured, her voice slipping into a whisper that threaded through my mind and sank like a shackle. Doubt and terror twisted within me, for I felt the fibers of her being mingling with the shadows at my feet, and I knew she did not simply wish to be freed, she hungered for life, for vengeance. With surprising force, historical images flashed in my mind, the rage and despair of those who had come before me, flickering like the dying light of the projector, each moment revealing grim stories woven into this cursed theater. There were murders and betrayals, artistic failures, and obsessive loves twisted into unrecognizable shapes. I was surrounded by centuries of unfulfilled dreams made manifest, but what awakened my instincts was the unrelenting sensation that the shadows were not just echoes of the past, they were inextricably linked to my very presence here. The fabric of reality warped as I swayed between the tangible and the ethereal, feeling the pulse of the theater beneath my feet, a sinister thrum that beckoned me to join its sorrow. Then the darkness surged, and for a fleeting moment, I caught a glimpse of Anna's face behind the shadowy figures, struggling, reaching out to me with a look of painful intensity. "Don't let go of the book." She screamed silently, her lips miming as the shadows closed in, an impenetrable wall of despair. I dared not loosen my grip, the leather hot against my clammy palms. "Join us." A cacophony of voices clamored, swirling around me, pushing against my senses with unseen force, until one chilling scream sliced through, reverberating within the hollow chamber. "You must choose," the projector sputtered, images warping in and out of focus, visions now a whirlwind of horror mingled with the secrets of the very film I had sought to understand. The approaching specters, desperate and pleading, drew closer, their forms grotesquely deforming, crying for liberation, and yet, that liberation would demand a price. Just when I thought the shadows had completely enveloped me, I glimpsed the book outstretched on the floor, its pages fluttering as if caught in a tempest. I had to decide, to keep searching for answers, to dive deeper into this dark legacy, or to succumb to the countless pleading hands reaching out from the vastness of darkness. As the shadows closed in, I seized my breath, preparing to plunge headlong back into the chaos, the weight of the answers, the screams, and whispers echoing in my mind, when the theater quaked violently beneath me. The wooden beams creaked as sinister laughter crescendoed, just before the ceiling above began to tremble and crack, dust and plaster spiraling down like a final grave warning, and then, just as the weight of the darkness crashed down, I noticed a figure moving through the shadows, a bright light illuminating its path, bearing a face that I had not expected to see. A youthful visage, defiant and radiant, carved from the very essence of life. "Stay with me," she called out, her voice slicing through the echoing madness. But before I could respond, the ground quaked violently, and the chaos took over, drowning out her cry, making every decision seem futile as the ancient theater crumbled around me. The last thing I saw was her outstretched hand against the backdrop of swirling shadows, a brilliant contrast to the engulfing abyss, before I was pulled into the void. The darkness enveloped me entirely, a suffocating shroud that pressured every inch of my being. I felt myself being drawn deeper into the void, as if the shadows clawed at my very essence, intent on pulling me into their eternal torment. An icy chill threatened to freeze my heart as I fought against the currents that sought to usher me into the abyss. Just as I began to surrender to the panic, somehow, I found myself standing in a refuge from the darkness. I blinked, taking in my new surroundings. The theater had transformed. The walls pulsed with a sickly glow, echoing with fragmented scenes from films that once lit up the screen. now grotesque and twisted in their portrayal of reality. Images of terror flashed before me, each frame capturing the raw horror hidden within the film reels, the haunting gaze of the woman, hidden shadows creeping out of dark corners, and a man screaming, his eyes wide as silent screams echoed throughout the hall. It was a cinematic nightmare. The whispers returned, low and persistent, crawling around my ears like 1,000 insects. "Find the truth," they hissed, swirling together like smoke caught in a windless room. My heart raced. What truth? And whose truth? But here, in this grotesque theater, answers seemed elusive, like figures darting in and out of flickering frames that I moved forward, my feet unsteady against the distorted ground, my pulse thumping in my ears. As I ventured deeper, I stumbled upon the remnants of an old concession stand, its glass case shattered, sprawled across the floor like the remnants of broken dreams. Unheated popcorn kernels rolled like teeth across the ground, creating a disorienting sound that echoed through the empty theater, and there, amongst the debris, I noticed a peculiar photograph lying half buried beneath a layer of dust and warped candy wrappers. With trembling hands, I picked it up, a chilling sensation washing over me as I examined the image. It featured the woman who had sought my help, her hollow eyes shimmering with a mixture of desperation and malevolence. But there was more. A shadowy figure stood behind her, obscured but menacing, its presence palpable. My heart pounded as I recognized the outline of the figure, its slender frame and an almost playful tilting of the head that mirrored the grotesque face from before. The film reel to my left clicked and whirred involuntarily, casting flickering images onto the wall. Like a conjured spell, the fabric of the past unspooled before me. I watched, frozen in terror, as the woman stepped onto the screen, her fate unfolding in blood-curdling detail. Scenes of torment washed over me, and I found myself gasping in horror at how the once vibrant colors of the theater melted into bleak and oppressive shades. I could hardly comprehend the acts of cruelty that had transpired within the very walls that encased me. Each scream echoed sharply, etching itself into my mind, as haunting eyes stared through the screen straight into my soul, yet, beneath the cacophony of cries, one voice rang louder than the rest, Anna's voice. I strained to hear her clear, distinct plea cutting through the chaos. "You have to face them. Face them," she cried, urgency spilling over into desperation. Reality shifted abruptly, and I was transported into a chilling moment from the theater's past, a dimly lit corridor, saturated with the heady smell of fear. There were hushed voices, accusations whispered as shadows darted from one corner to another. I saw her there, in her last moments, surrounded by phantoms of betrayal and sorrow, trapped in her own unraveling horror story. This place was her prison, a theater of horrors replaying again and again. And somehow, I was tied to it all. Why? I shouted into the void, but the answer eluded me like smoke through my fingers. Was I merely an observer in this twisted reality? Or had the theater chosen me to replay the roles of those who had come before? Suddenly, the lights began to dim further, and with each flickering pulse, the temperature plummeted. A low growl reverberated through the air, vibrating in my bones and originating from deep within the shadows, where figures moved restlessly, their whispers turning into shrill wails of protest. They recoiled from the flickering light, mere specters of sorrow infused with rage. I understood then they were not innocent, they were the harbingers of my fate, the culmination of the horrors I had yet to uncover. Before I could react, I felt a hand grip my shoulder with chilling force. I swung my head around, and terror gripped my heart as I found myself face to face with the shadowy figure from the photograph, a faceless silhouette, pulsing with darkness, eyes that glimmered like stars against the void. With a hiss that echoed like a dying breath, it spoke. "You've come to seek the truth, but truth comes with a cost. Are you prepared to lose everything?" The words hung heavy in the air, a warning echoing through the chaos, just as the lights flickered out entirely, plunging me into an abyss devoid of sight, sound or any hope of escape. And then, a light ignited too bright, too pure. It erupted from behind me, illuminating the shadows that clawed hungrily at my sides. I turned back, heart thundering, only to discover the figure was now standing inches from me, the once faceless entity dissolving into something familiar, not her. The figure snarled, its voice twisting with a serpentine undertone, as I recognized the features forming an all too familiar face emerging from the shadows, framed in luminous light. Before I could scream, a sharp pain pierced the veil of darkness, and I felt myself being pulled apart, the very essence of my being unraveling in the face of unspeakable horror. But just before everything truly ended in chaos, I caught a glimpse, a fleeting moment of clarity, Anna's anguished face, locked in the battle to be free, a single tear streaming down her cheek, whispering to me through the cacophony, and then sudden silence. The actors were set, ready for their roles anew, as threads of fate twisted like vines around me, pulling taut, and I was left to wonder, would I be the last to fill the void, or the first to uncover a horror deeper than despair? As my senses adjusted to the silence, a suffocating stillness enveloped me, wrapping around me like a noose. I was no longer surrounded by chaotic screaming or haunting visuals. Now, it felt as if every breath I took punctuated the gloom, each exhale echoing in the desolate void. It was disorienting, like waking from a nightmare only to find yourself trapped in a waking hell. Before me, the cavernous theater stretched beyond recognition, the once familiar aisles twisted into a labyrinth plagued with shadows. My heartbeat reverberated in the silence, a warning siren that weighed heavier with each pulse. An overwhelming sense of dread gnawed at the edges of my mind. Something was coming. I sensed it before I could see it, an increase in the darkness, a thickening of the air as if something unfathomable was slipping closer. Panic surged within me, a visceral tide threatening to wash away my resolve. I need to find a way out, I muttered, forcing myself to take a step forward into the velvety black, yet as I moved deeper, an unsettling sensation clawed at my back in awareness, as if unseen eyes were tracking my every movement. Every shadow seemed to swell, fueled by a malicious curiosity. Behind me, the theater's ancient walls creaked ominously, sending a shiver racing down my spine. I shoved the image of Anna's tortured face from my mind, unwilling to let despair close in. But I couldn't shake her voice, ringing in my ears like a broken record. It echoed warnings, urging me to reveal the darkness that clung to every corner of this cursed place. The theater began to shift again, images swirling in and out of focus, invading my thoughts, drowning my focus with each flicker. I caught glimpses of a film montage, blood-stained tickets, a projector casting erratic light like a strobe across terrified patrons, each face contorted in horror, mouths wide but silenced. A cold realization gripped me, they weren't just images, they were memories of those who had entered here before. As the pieces fell into place, I stumbled into a side corridor. The air was thick with mildew and despair, the walls festooned with cracked posters of movies long forgotten, angelic smiles turned into twisted visages of horror. Suddenly, a low rumble vibrated through me, making the very air tremble. From behind the posters, dark forms slithered past, they were whispers of souls, racked with torment, fading in and out of being. They clawed for exit, but the theater was a prison, it had crafted them in its depths, and their mournful wails washed over me like drowning waves. Panic set in, and I stumbled backward, colliding with something solid yet unyielding. I turned to find a mirror, grotesquely warped, reflecting twisted images of my own terror-stricken face. Only the reflection shifted, grinning back at me with malicious glee. In that fleeting moment, I felt pulled toward it, as if the darkness behind the glass beckoned me to join its spectral embrace. This way it seemed to whisper, soft yet insistent, determined to evade the thrall. I backed away, but the corridor seemed to elongate, morphing into an infinite dark tunnel. I shook my head, desperate to break free from the hallucinatory grip. I had to keep moving forward. Pushing deeper into the bowels of the theater, I stumbled upon a door old and splintered, yet ajar. A nameplate tarnished by age caught my eye. Red projection room. The door creaked ominously as I nudged it open. Inside, the air felt electric, charged with an unsettling energy, and despite the chaos of emotions swirling within me, a morbid curiosity compelled me to step inside. The room was littered with antiquated film reels, haphazardly strewn across the doughy carpet, each one labeled with names I recognized from Anna's nightmare, a collection of stories, of lives, bound to the theater's spell. My fingers brushed over a reel labeled Anna's Final Cut, and an unsettling chill surged through me. Before I could think, I heard the unmistakable sound of the projector whirring to life behind me, the flickering light cutting through the darkness in swift pulses. I spun around, my heart racing, as scenes began to unravel. Anna's final moments, suspended between terror and eternity. I watched helplessly as the projector spit forth fragmented images of her struggling, pleading, surrounded by shadows that surged like tidewaters closing in on her innocence. It was both mesmerizing and soul-crushing, as if the theater was feeding off her plight, crafting a spectacle woven from despair. Just then, I noticed something else in the corner of the frame. The shadowy figure lurked, more defined, more sinister, whispering sweet promises that twisted into curses. Then, abruptly, the film pixelated and sputtered, and the room fell silent. Dread gripped me, an icy hand squeezing my throat. The darkness behind me shifted. I knew it was watching, waiting for me to succumb to the echoing madness. A deep whisper slipped through the stillness, chilling to the bone. Your turn. Before I could scream, the light sputtered out, plunging me into suffocating darkness once more. I felt its something cold and wet brush against my cheek, the unmistakable murmur of 1,000 trapped souls urging me forward. Despair clawed at my mind, as whispers crescendoed, telling me the moment had arrived. And then there was a seed of molten terror as I sensed movement behind me, heavy, lurching. I turned, eyes racing to adjust, heartbeat hammering like a drum. Shadows congealed, expanding, transforming until they coalesced into a single horrific figure, its eyes blazing with the malevolence of the forgotten. I inhaled sharply, but it was too late. Welcome to your final cut, it hissed, voice a tortured echo of Anna's pleamy existence hanging by a thread as I prepared to face the horror that was about to unfold. The realization crashed upon me, I was not an audience member in this theater, I was the next act. And the curtain was about to rise. My heart pounded in my chest like a frantic animal seeking escape as the figure cloaked in shadow advanced, its features indistinct, a formless mass of dread that whispered secrets far too terrible to comprehend. I pressed my back against the cold, cracked wall of the projection room, searching for some refuge, but there was none to be found. The air thickened, rippling with the palpable energy of unspeakable horrors. Your final cut, it repeated, a grotesque parody of Anna's voice, twisting memories into a weapon aimed at my sanity. My mind raced with thoughts of escape, but my legs felt rooted, bound by paralyzing fear. I was not just battling a figment of my overactive imagination, it felt as if I were facing the very embodiment of darkness that had ensnared Anna. The shadows pulsed, undulating like venomous tendrils reaching for me, drawn to my despair. I choked back a scream, my throat dry as I forced myself to look away from the empty, soulless eyes that seemed to swallow the light. I had to remember why I was here. Anna had been lost within these walls, and whatever had claimed her, whatever had brewed in this hellish theater was now hunting me too. With a sudden burst of energy, I tore my gaze away from the looming horror, scrambling for Anna's reel among the messy scatter of films. I had to view it entirely. Perhaps it held the key to our shared fate, a clue that would unravel this nightmare before it consumed me. My fingers trembled as they grasped the film canister, an almost tactile connection to her, a lifeline stretched across our shared torment. As I hurriedly inserted the reel into the projector, a low hiss echoed from behind me, an unnatural sound that twisted like a wound-up spring ready to explode. The room shuddered, the shadows seemed to breathe, drawing in and out, gaining strength. The flickering light burst forth once again, illuminating the dim corners of the room with a ghostly glow. Images spilled like lost memories onto the screen, and there was Anna, fragile and tear-stained but unwavering in the shoot of her final moments. The film portrayed her while she stood alone in the dim light of that very theater, an unseen audience ensnaring her every move. Her lips formed silent words, pleading for help, while shadows crept closer, reaching out with unspeakable hunger. Then came her laughter, joyous and cheerful, ringing backward into me, a contrast to the chaos that ensued. I grasped the edge of the projector, desperate and heartbroken, for I saw it now, an ancient curse trapped within these celluloid frames, fueling the terror. The audience, every tortured soul I'd glimpsed before, had watched helplessly, unable to intervene as the unending cycle of horror played out. But then a crack of thunder resonated from outside, within the walls of the theater. The storm surged, rattling the very foundation of this cursed place, illuminating the shadows just long enough for me to witness the figure's malevolence as it drew nearer, feeding off the essence of Anna's despair through the flickering film. "Join us," it hissed, the words reverberating in my ears as the room vibrated with a sinister chant, a chorus of former patrons becoming one, urging me to abandon hope and surrender to oblivion. Panic surged anew as the power flickered, the sound without a name blooming into a cacophony of pain. But amid the swell of dark energy, I caught the reflection of someone moving behind me in the murky glass of the projector. My breath caught in my throat as I turned. "Anna," I whispered, clutching the film tightly, willing her to be more than an echo of the past. The spectral form flickered in and out of existence, trapped within this hellscape, her face carved from sorrow but pleading for my understanding. "They want to show you, feel you, be you," she gasped, her essence rippling through the charred edges of reality, a beacon of insanity amid the swirling madness. But just as quickly, her image was ripped away, devoured by the encroaching shadows. Resigned to a fate sealed in darkness, the figure lunged forward. "You will become part of the show," it growled, transforming Anna's cry of warning into an anguished scream that echoed in my very being. The world spun violently as the film crackled and burst with a blinding light. I reached out, fingers trembling against the screen, desperate to grasp Anna's essence one last time. But in that moment, the screen exploded in a flash of pure white flames, licking the edges of my vision, consuming everything in a blaze of terror, and then darkness. A profound stillness enveloped me, as if I had stepped over the threshold into an entirely different realm, one devoid of sound, one where the soul was left to hang suspended, trapped between the dimensions of fear and despair. That I felt the cold edge of panic gripping me again, unable to discern if I was alive or merely a wisp caught in this theater's cruel web. My heartbeat quickened, the silence stretching infinitely, compressing me until I could bear it no longer. I had to find Anna, had to confront whatever horror awaited me in this dreadful blackness, and just when I thought awareness would slip away completely, I heard a whisper, clear and slicing through the void. In that fleeting sound, I recognized Anna's pleading voice as it drifted, "Find me before the curtain drops." The profound sense of dread returned tenfold as distant echoes rose around me, muffled laughter, shuffling steps, and haunting cries. A cold, wet sensation tightened around my wrist, drawing me back, pulling me toward an unseen abyss. Somewhere, the theater stirred back to life. That I was far from alone, and the curtain was slowly, deliberately rising once more. The theater exhaled, releasing a heavy breath that rattled the empty chairs and sent shivers racing down my spine. The whispers morphed into a cacophony of indistinct mutterings, bouncing off the cracked walls, laced with echoes of panic and despair. It felt like a symphony of lost souls, entwined in a dance of agony, each note a reminder of what had been claimed by the shadows. As I pressed deeper into the inky darkness, the cold grip around my wrist began to tighten painfully. My heart raced, feeling as if it were about to explode as dread seeped into my bones, and a guttural growl reverberated through the air, resonating with an ancient power. It was drawing nearer. "Anna." I called into the suffocating void, but the silence swelled around me like a malignant presence, swallowing my voice and pulling it into the depths of despair. My pulse pounded in my ears, an unwelcome reminder that I was alive amidst this haunting pandemonium. Without further hesitation, I stumbled forward, barely aware of my surroundings. The remnants of the film reel dangled from my fingers, a lifeline tethering me to my purpose. I had to find her. I had to understand the hell we were trapped in. The air grew colder, biting and raw, as I navigated through the warped aisles and over littered debris that crunched beneath my feet. Each step felt like a sacrilege, an intrusion into the sanctum of suffering that surrounded me. Shadows danced just out of sight, flickering in and out of being like the remnants of a dream trying to break free. "What is this place?" I whispered, half to myself and half to the unseen entities watching from the darkness. But the theater remained inexplicably silent. The only answer I received was the sudden crack of an unseen door swinging open somewhere down the hall. A beam of ghostly white light shot through the gloom, beckoning me forward. Drawn irresistibly toward it, I rounded a corner, stumbling into a room that felt alive with malevolence. It was a cluttered storage space filled with faded scripts and forgotten props, remnants of a time long past. The scent of decay permeated the air, mingling with something metallic that made my stomach churn. In the corner stood a large mirror, its surface cracked and webbed, reflecting distorted images of the darkened room. I was captivated, unable to tear my gaze away as shadows swirled within its depths, threatening to swallow me whole. And in the reflections, I saw glimpses of face-shallowed eyes, twisted mouths, and contorted expressions caught in eternal screams. They long for freedom, a voice hissed from behind me, a silky, sinister timbre that sent my heart racing. They crave a moment, just a moment off life beyond this cursed place. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat as a ghostly figure materialized before me. It was a woman, her face an unsettling blend of beauty and sorrow. "Help us. Together, we can break the cycle," she implored, reaching toward me with skeletal fingers, tears streaming down her translucent cheeks. My instincts screamed at me to flee from her, but something compelled me to stay, to understand what she wanted from me. "What do you need?" I stammered, my voice a trembling echo in the overwhelming quiet. "Find the final cut," she urged. "It is hidden beneath layers of their greed and selfishness. But beware, every choice you make here has consequences." The shadows grow restless as the curtain draws closer. Her words echoed hauntingly within me as she shimmered before dissipating like smoke in the wind. An electrical current of fear coursed through my veins. The final cut. What did that mean? Then came the laughter, maniacal and echoing, reverberating through the very walls, as if the theater itself was delighted by my confusion and fear. The air thickened, pressing down upon me until all I could think about was the crushing weight of dread. Beneath the cracked floorboards, an ominous creaking began, the sound sharp and deliberate as something stirred beneath my feet. The walls echoed a low groaning, whispering secrets long buried, and a sense of malevolence wrapped around me like a vice. I needed to escape. But as I turned toward the exit, the darkness surged, tendrils reaching out to ensnare me. Panic coursed through my veins like ice water, and I stumbled backward, landing hard against the mirror, my breath choking in my throat. With an anguished scream, I watched as the surface rippled like water, trapping my reflection in an infinite loop of terror. The theater groaned again, the shadows shifting and swirling around me, whispering promises of despair and grasping for my very soul. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed, and the mirror shattered, shards flying through the air like rain, cutting into me as through the glass. A hand reached out toward me, fingers blackened and twisted, silhouetted against the dim light behind the fragmented surface. Heart racing, I felt my resolve waver. Was it Anna? Was she reaching for me from within this realm of nightmares? No. I shrieked, scrambling to pull my arm away from the dark influence gripping my wrist. But it was too late. The shadow burst forth from the fractured mirror, a looming specter eclipsing all light, and I felt the cold touch envelop me completely. "Join us," the chorus of souls whispered, and as my vision darkened, a single truth crystallized in my mind: the theater was awakening, and I was the final act in its macabre performance. And then, I closed my eyes as the curtain fell. As darkness descended into an embrace thick with desperation, I felt myself suspended between a world of light and a suffocating void. I floundered within that abyss, dragging my memories like anchors, trying to fight the crushing weight pressing against me. The theater had become a living entity, each pulsating shadow a reminder of the countless souls seeking solace or revenge. That I opened my eyes to find the world around me transformed, a fractured jigsaw of broken images flashing before me. I was no longer standing in the storeroom. Instead, I stood on the rickety stage beneath a curtain woven of despair, the audience seats staring back like hollow eyes, cheering for my demise. The familiar whispers now surged into a symphony of lamentation, urging me forward as if my longing to know the truth had summoned their restless spirits. A spotlight flickered above, illuminating the scene, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the walls. I could hear my heartbeat, a frantic drumming that echoed within the hollow space. "Anna!" I screamed, my voice mingling with the anguished cries of the forsaken. But the only response was the dreadful silence that hung heavy in the air, pregnant with sorrow. In the spotlight's glow, I saw movements at the edge of the stage. Flickering phantoms emerged, their expressions twisted in a grotesque masquerade of grief, revenge, and desperation. Among them, a familiar figure stepped forward, the woman from the mirror, her essence fractured yet hauntingly beautiful. But she looked different now, a vicious hunger flickered in her eyes, and the shadows draped around her like a second skin. "You came searching for answers," she snarled, her voice tinged with malice. "They are here, woven into the very fabric of this accursed place. You have awakened them. Chills skittered down my spine as I clutched my arms against the chill that had seized the theater. I looked around to see the spirits of the lost reach toward me, their fingers outstretched as if inviting me to join their eternal despair. I staggered back, desperate to escape their clamoring grasp and yet horrified at what I might uncover. What do you want from me? I gasped, futilely wrestling against an unseen force pulling me toward the stage's edge. Her laughter erupted, a cacophony that pierced the silence with razor-sharp clarity. Freedom, dear child. Or perhaps it's revenge you desire. You walk amongst us now, entwined with our fate. This theater demands a sacrifice, and I see that you are perfect for the role. Shadows writhed at her feet, snapping and swirling like angry serpents, awaiting their moment to strike. The very wooden floor beneath me groaned, betraying the presence of something ominous lurking below, something that could snap me up like a twig. This is madness. I shouted, my voice trembling amidst the tumult of spirits. I won't be part of this. A chill surged through my veins as I felt a probing presence encircle me. But the reality of my situation finally hit. What if I was already part of this cursed performance, ensnared within the shadow's sickening machinations? The air quivered with tension, thick and stifling, as the theater closed in around me like a predator claiming its prey. Suddenly, a soft but piercing melody echoed from somewhere deep in the bowels of the building, pulling at my essence. I turned, mesmerized by the sound, and slipped toward the side of the stage without realizing. It crescendoed, rising above the whispers, mesmerizing, an enchanting siren song, luring me into oblivion. As I followed the melody deeper into the labyrinth lined with tattered posters and the remnants of bygone productions, I caught a glimpse of a door, slightly ajar, emanating a flickering light that danced across the walls like fireflies in the night. The seductive tune whispered promises of truths hidden behind that threshold. Was Anna beyond that door, waiting, perhaps, for my arrival? With a heart full of dread but driven by desperation, I pressed forward, ignoring the cries urging me to turn back. But before I could reach for the handle, a cold hand clutched my shudera, gnarled and rotting limb that radiated an ancient sorrow. I turned, only for my breath to catch as a face emerged from the darkness, a visage twisted and contorted, eyes gleaming with fury and regret. Turn back. It screeched, its voice a disorienting blend of cries. You will die here like the rest of us. You don't know. The specter's words echoed in my mind, but my instincts prepared for a fight. I felt the icy fingers tighten, overwhelming me with fear and the realization that my choices could unleash horrors beyond comprehension. But as I twisted to break free, a deafening crash reverberated through the theater. The floor trembled beneath my feet, and from the darkness breached a grotesque swarm of faceless shadows, coalescing into misshapen figures yearning for release, their collective screams drowning out the melody. Join us. They cried, stretching their arms as darkness clawed at my mind, threatening to spill into my very being as they surged forward. And then, in that moment, with nowhere left to flee, I saw Ida glimmer from the door that held the secrets of the final cut, illuminating the chaotic scene before me, a line drawn between salvation and perdition. But the shadows lunged, and as darkness enveloped me, a fierce certainty arose. I was no mere audience anymore, I was the lead in a theater of horrors. The stage was set, and I was left pondering my very soul's worth. I stood trembling in the suffocating darkness, my heart pounding as the cacophony of haunted whispers echoed in my ears. Shadows writhed around me, an incoherent mass of sorrow and anger, and the figure that had so violently seized me was a grotesque specter of despair, twisted and unrecognizable in its intent. I felt surrounded by eyes, countless eyes watching, waiting, their hunger palpable in the air thick with dread. The grasp of the shadows tightened like a vice. Join us, they murmured, a chorus of lost souls craving the warmth of life that was so cruelly denied to them. I stumbled backward, hands flailing, desperate for escape, but I was transfixed by one single, agonizing thought: they were once like me, trapped within this nightmare that had clung to the theater for centuries, and somehow, I was now part of their grim tale. Just beyond, I caught another glimmer, a small flickering light reminiscent of hope. A soft melody drifted through the suffocating air. It was Anna's voice, beckoning me with desperate urgency, urging me toward the threshold of the door that beckoned like a siren. Find the final cut. Rang in my ears, a mantra that ignited my adrenaline, giving me the strength to push forward, but as I drew nearer, the shadows surged, claws of darkness reaching for my ankles, dragging me down, pulling me into their cold embrace. I clutched at the air, panic gnawing at my sanity, and with a wild surge, I broke free, lunging for the door. My heart thundered in my chest as panic surged within me. The thing behind me hissed, its laughter vibrating through the air like thunder rolling ominously above. The door creaked open, and as I entered, the bittersweet taste of freedom washed over me, mingled with the stench of decay and rot. I was standing in a room strewn with debris, old film reels stacked haphazardly like the corpses of forgotten dreams. But my gaze was drawn to a singular object, the final cut, a polished projector humming with malevolent energy, illuminating the chamber in ghostly beams. As I approached, I felt an electrical pulse wash over me. Each frame flickered with the lives it had captured, the remnants of misfortunes long past. I uncovered a reel, its label frayed, Anna's last show. Trembling fingers brushed against the dusty surface, and I turned it toward the projector as shadows pressed against the room, writhing in anticipation. The whir of the machine echoed like a heartbeat. Images leaped to life, and the theater became a portal, revealing lost moments crystallized in time. The souls of the tormented entwined with mine, drowning amidst a tapestry of pain and laughter. I watched, transfixed, as Anna appeared, shimmering like a ghost. Her eyes pleaded for me to save her, to understand the horrors that clung to her, enveloping her in a deathly dance. But then an unexpected image erupted, a flash of blinding light that consumed the screen, a vision of the true monster, the curator of this dark world, grinning as it cast shadows over Anna's radiant smile. Horror struck me as realizations came crashing down. This figure had been watching her and feeding off the despair that echoed in the halls of this theater. The very essence of the curse had its roots in this being, its hunger buried deep within the history of lives erased. Suddenly, a chill crept into my bones, and the walls seemed to pulse with fury. The shadows coiled and twisted, merging into a formless mass that lunged toward me, whispers rising to a deafening roar. "You cannot escape!" They screamed, a gale of despair breaking against my unwavering determination. That I staggered back, twisting away from the chaos that threatened to devour me. "No!" I yelled, grasping onto the projector with a fierce resolve. "You will not take me!" I activated the film with a trembling hand, determined to confront the truth and expose the evil that had ensnared Anna and countless others. The whirring of the projector intensified, images flashing, her laughter colliding with despair, her hope drowning in darkness, the monster wrapping its sinewy tendrils around her heart. "Face your fears." Anna's voice cut through the storm of shadows. I forced myself to look into the concoction of horror birthed from the depths of the reel. The shadows recoiled, their screams blending into a wall of fury, but there she was, crystal clear, Anna's face shining through the deep abyss. "You have to let it free." But the figure behind me loomed ever closer, its presence suffocating. "It is a bargain you cannot win." It boomed, and suddenly I understood. Whatever dark magic held this theater together fed on sacrifice, on fear, on lives devoured by dread. "You can do this," Anna's voice echoed. "You can break the curse." As the malevolence rushed towards me, fueled by rage and relentless hate, I plunged my hand into the shadows that wrapped around me, seizing the darkness like an anchor, ripping at its core, and shouted with every ounce of breath I possessed, "You are nothing but a remnant of fear. I choose to break the cycle." And in that moment, everything shattered. I pulled the shadows into the light of the projector, and they writhed, losing their power. The cacophony came to a halt as the figures of the damned cried out, merging into one singular voice, "Free us!" My resolve solidified. I pressed my will against the burden of their cries, unleashing the screech of the projector to reveal the blood-stained truth. Suddenly, the room flickered, light flooded the dark corners of the theater. The cursed walls peeled back, and the malevolent figure surged forward, no longer a predator in the dark, but a withering remnant of its own twisted making. The theater exploded with brilliance as the light blanketed the entire room, and then, like dust in the wind, the figure dissolved, a scream echoing like shattering glass as the theater released its grip upon the souls it had entangled for centuries. The shadows burst, releasing countless specters into the ether as Anna stood, radiant amidst the wreckage, not as a ghost lost in despair, but as a spirit of hope reborn, free. For a moment, the theater stood silent, the whispers fading, but in my heart pulsed an aching knowledge. The theater was no longer the same twisted thing. It had endured more than I could fathom, and while I had broken its spell, I could feel its murmur of darkness still lingering, waiting to fill an empty void. As I turned to leave, a glimmer caught my eye, a shadow at the very edge of the stage, flickering like a flame long extinguished but still warm. For in freeing Anna and those before her, a fragment of the darkness remained, a piece of its power lingering like an unfinished chord. Not all are free, a whisper slithered through the air, chilling my heart. Not yet. I fought the urge to look back, understanding the descent from which I had emerged was not fully sealed. With every step toward the exit, the lingering whispers danced behind me, promising that though the theater may hold its secrets, the remnants of evil, however small, would always remain, and as the door creaked shut, I felt that chilling truth resonate in the theater's musty air. The darkness had awakened, not vanquished, just waiting patiently for another pair of curious hands to seek its haunting embrace. I would always be part of this grim tale. In the end, I had merely turned the final cut.